Hello, and thank you for joining HBCUGO.TV and Tennessee State University for our virtual masterclass series. We feature award-winning broadcasters, directors, production specialists, and many others in the communications field. I'm Dr. Ariel Vincent, a professor in the Department of Communications at Tennessee State University. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from the current host of the NFL Today on CBS and Inside the NFL on Showtime. The one and only James JB Brown is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning network broadcaster who's hosted the Super Bowl a record-tying 9 times. JB is also a special correspondent for CBS News and contributes to programs such as 60 Minutes, CBS This Morning, CBS Evening News, and 48 Hours. JB, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Dr. Vincent, first of all, thank you so very much for having me on board. Thank God you're the better looking of the two, so it'll be a more pleasant experience for all.
No. Oh, thank you. Yes, we're just so glad that you're here. Let's go ahead and start from the beginning. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to do what you do now?
So I'll do my best. And Doc, you keep me on track to be succinct. Native Washingtonian. I shared with you beforehand that my mother, God bless her, was from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. My father from Washington, D.C. They were high school graduates, but I love to say they had PhDs in drive and determination to raise the 5 of us kids to go on and be blessed like you are in the collegiate environment. I'm the oldest of 5, 4 boys and 1 girl. I played basketball about 80 pounds and 200 years ago, and was blessed to go on to college, blessed to go to an excellent Ivy League school, and from there move on into corporate America, working at Xerox and Eastman Kodak in sales and sales management after I got cut by the Atlanta Hawks in the NBA, and made a radical switch into broadcasting, which actually started with doing some local television work with the CBS station there, and doing broadcasting for the then named Washington Bullets and BET, doing black college basketball and football. And the rest kind of led to where I am now. So that's the shorthand story. Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. We want to know, what's been your biggest challenge or that you've done so far?
Wow. Okay. I guess that's pretty open-ended. Biggest challenge maybe from a standpoint of trying to master what I do in the broadcast arena is doing big events and doing events that I've not had any experience at. I wanted to make sure that I would not be marginalized or colonized to think I could only do certain sports. So I covered the Tour de France, or Tour de France, if you will. I did hockey, believe it or not, too, Dr. Vincent, and did mountain climbing events. So I did a range of things so that any future employers would say I could do any number of things, as well as, thankfully, to be involved in the world of news as well. Some of the more challenging aspects of it was that, hey, like any other professional pursuit, there were difficulties. My first time around at CBS, this is my second time, the first time around at CBS, I was one of the then young announcers who had been offered the job of either being the first black play-by-play of college basketball or to be the first black host of the college studio show. And Dr. Vincent, I got neither one. The boss who offered me the job never came to tell me why I didn't get it. And I was very disappointed, very hurt, and almost got out of the business. But I learned, just like in playing sports, you cannot be a wimp in those things. Look, I'm blessed to be an ordained minister. My faith is central to everything that I do. But so I knew then that there would be another opportunity forthcoming. And I just needed to make sure I was prepared to capitalize on that. I hope that gives at least a thumbnail sketch of that, Dr. Vincent.
Absolutely. I have a couple of questions that stem from that. The first one, what's your favorite event to cover? You've done so many things.
You know what? You probably can tell. Well, first of all, basketball was my love. That's when I was weighing about 195 pounds as opposed to 205 pounds now. So I was up and down. But heavens, you know what? I've grown so accustomed to football. It's comfortable. It's a sport where you can take your time and really paint the picture. But to be honest with you, whatever my next assignment is what I really find interesting. And I'm hoping that the students will see that as well too, because the next challenge is the one that you always want to master and do an effective job at, which is why I did all of those unusual sports, and never ever get complacent, because my own downfall in terms of not making it in terms of my first pursuit to become a professional basketball player was totally on me. I got confident, overly confident, got complacent, rested on my laurels, forgetting that one important expression to keep in mind is that you are never, ever standing still in your professional pursuit or anything else. You're either getting better or you're regressing. That's a fact. So I vow to never, ever get complacent and just rest that way. And I hope that kind of explains my work ethic, Dr. Vincent.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such great advice. So hopefully all you students out there who are listening, you took that one to heart. For our next student question, I think it goes off of what we were just talking about. How do you see your role as a sportscaster in the realm of social justice? We're seeing so many athletes today, like LeBron James, speaking about the Black Lives Matter movement. This season, we even saw athletes supporting the movement on their jerseys. What's your role?
So my role, first of all, from a professional standpoint, is to make certain that I am properly covering the sport story, that I am thinking beyond just the superficial and get the insight, the passion, and the strong feelings that exist with those athletes who are articulating why they feel so passionate about what they're doing and what role they can play. If we step back and take a look at the big picture, sports by and large has always been a platform, if you will, that has helped to move the social needle forward. From the earliest first Black men or women engaging in whatever sport as a player or as a coach. So sports has always been very significant in that regard. So it's incumbent upon me, number two, to make sure that I give them that voice by asking the relevant questions and painting a big picture. It is hurtful to me to hear some people on television, most of them in the news arena, who will say all they want, the infamous expression about LeBron James given by one person was he should just shut up and dribble the basketball. That kind of narrow, myopic, indeed even a bigoted mindset is what has been prevailing for so long. Now we're seeing it, these athletes, the WNBA, the NBA, and even sports like hockey and soccer joining on board, because most young people see that kind of ignorant thinking, the expressions of man's inhumanity to man, is something that we all need to be about. And clearly everybody else has an opinion. They're meaningfully engaged and involved in their communities, trying to strengthen the fabric of their communities. So why not have athletes of color play the same role that they have been playing all along, but now are able to give voice to that?
Right. Absolutely. I agree with that. Thank you. I want to play a really quick clip from CBS This Morning.
His highly publicized suspension from NASCAR. Back in April, Larson was fired from his racing team for using a racial slur during a public virtual racing event. In his first TV interview, Larson speaks with CBS News special correspondent James Brown about race in America, those he has hurt, and why he is hoping for a second chance.
I know deep down I'm not a racist. I said a racist word, and I can fully understand why people would label me a racist.
Larson's going to clear him.
Kyle Larson, the 28-year-old six-time NASCAR winner, is one of the sport's rising stars. But back in April of this year, Larson was heard using the N-word while speaking on headset during a virtual racing event.
You can't hear me? Hey, Kyle, you're talking to everyone, but
what prompted you calling your friend, who is white, who was a spotter for you, why did you call him the N-word?
I'd raced with him in Australia, and the group that we were with kind of used the word casually as a greeting. I didn't use it in a way to degrade or insult anyone.
Now, when you say that it's kind of a term of endearment or it wasn't meant to be offensive, how is it that it's in use, and no matter what the circle, and people don't take offense at it?
It's not my word to use. I need to get it out of my vocabulary, and I have.
Larson's world quickly unraveled. He was fired from his racing team, lost his sponsors, and suspended indefinitely from NASCAR.
What does the word mean to you? What did it mean to you then? What does it mean to you now?
I guess I didn't think of how it took African Americans and probably in their thoughts took them back to slavery and things like that, and injustice and stuff that they have had to work.
So you had the opportunity to do the first TV interview since Kyle's suspension. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
You know what, Dr. Vincent, I was very excited to have that conversation because it needs to be had out in the open, in the public square, not just a black person talking to another black person or white on white. It needed to be white and black discussing it. Number two, I saw that in all the steps that particular young man had taken to educate himself, and you just saw a clip there of the two co-founders, a husband and wife team of the Urban Youth Racing Institute. Significant that they supported him because he, Kyle Larson, was involved with that couple there and their Urban Youth Racing School, which works with kids of color in STEM programs to help them get opportunities and jobs in NASCAR or other businesses as well. The fact that they supported him, and also a black freshman at Morehouse College was also a part of that Urban Youth Racing School. And he said he sat down and talked with Kyle Larson one-on-one, man-to-man. His mother was with him, and they felt the sincerity. So it's important to have that conversation out in the open in a public platform so people could see it, because the bottom line to me, and I understand that a lot of young black folks will use it, and even older black folks in their own circles, and they say it's a term of endearment. But what we found out there is that if the word is defined as negative, as demeaning, etc., it would seem to suggest that whoever uses it, it's inappropriate, because this young man, Kyle Larson, was using it like a number of other young black people who he hears using it, saying he was talking to another white guy and was talking in terms of a term of endearment. But of course, if a white person uses that word, they're vilified, ostracized, maybe kicked out, etc. Versus if a black person says it to another black person, that's not necessarily the case. So I'm hoping that it was thought-provoking, especially for those students who are considering going into journalism. Does that make sense, Doc?
Absolutely. It makes sense completely. And I'm so glad that you were able to have that conversation and that we were all able to witness it with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit. We have a couple other student questions. The next one is, do you have a kid, or do you have any kids, and do you have a family? I feel like all of our students are figuring out right now, do I want to go into this world? Do I not want to go into this world? So they want to know, how do you juggle family life with such a high profile career?
And I'm a firm believer, just a quick nugget, my high school coach, when I played basketball at DeMatha High School in the suburban Maryland area, he had all of his athletes understand, here's what he wanted the priorities to be: God first, family second, school third, then your sport. That was to be the priority. And I believe that, and certainly I've adapted and adopted that now. That's firmly the priority. So family is always going to be principal. Yes, it's understood that my job has me traveling a lot, but I try to make certain that I don't let my job consume me, as opposed to me orienting those things. One of the challenges associated with this COVID-19 environment are a lot of people being at home, spending a lot of quiet time, maybe not necessarily sought after. But what it did for me, Dr. Vincent, is it helped me to understand I majored in being busy a lot of times, majored in minor things. So I've worked to make sure I eliminate the minor things, because that quality time with your family, your wife, your husband, your kids. I've got a daughter, married, with 4 grandkids, 1 boy and 3 girls. And that time is precious to me while I'm in New York, because my job on Sundays has me in the studio all day. And I also am blessed to, as you mentioned, do a football show on Showtime. But I'm also up here working on a voter special that will air on CBS News this Friday night. But when I've completed that, I don't allow other things to get on my schedule for subsequent weeks, because my time with the family, especially the grandkids and my wife, that's precious time, and you need to prioritize that. Look, you hear people talk about it all the time, but you can't get that time back. That is number one.
Absolutely. My mom works in the business, and I remember as a kid, we were there with her. So we were there on weekends and hanging out and fitting in that time whenever we could. So,
And you know what, hey, Doc, that is so awesome to hear, because oftentimes, although we can't do it in this COVID environment, on the Showtime program, we would have a Christmas show where the employees, the talent, and the staff would bring their kids there. And they've been doing it every year. And we got video of that. So that's really some quality time that we get to talk about. And whenever I can take the grandkids with me on trips, I do that as well too. But obviously that's a challenge in this environment, and they want no parts of going outside. So in this environment.
yes, it's definitely a special time that they'll always remember. So that's great to hear too. Kind of switching gears again, students want to know, what does it take to be successful in the field of journalism?
I would say the answer to that is the same as what it takes to be successful in any business. And I've found that out for the years that I've been at it. So I would hope that the students would see this as an older brother who's been the route that many of them are looking to come, no matter what the arena is, pun intended. It takes being dedicated, being informed, being inquisitive, especially in this arena, being able to ask all of the right questions, the who, what, when, where, why are always important, but having a curious mind. And quite frankly, those who would be looking at these students to see whether or not they would do well in this arena, this environment, will be looking at their track record in college and even going back to high school. Have they shown a pattern of success, of inquisitiveness, of excellence in the classroom? Professor Vincent, recommendations that the young person has shown a desire to add more to it, to be of value. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't know something, people will look at your track record and say, well, based on the body of work that we've seen, if this student didn't know the answer, they went to the library, they went online, they did all the study to make certain that they will get the information so as to be valuable. Those are the kinds of intangibles that employers will be looking at to see, are we getting somebody who's going to be around for a while and not just a worker looking to stay within confines.
Absolutely. When you were coming up, did you have a mentor, or do you have recommendations on how students can find a mentor?
My first mentors were clearly, and that's the case in any nuclear family, my mother and father. My father worked 2 and 3 jobs. He was a security guard at a prison, and he drove a taxi cab. And during the holidays, he would go and work extra overtime to make money for the 5 of us for the holidays. My mother wanted to be a homemaker, and she was excellent at it. She was 5'5". We called her the sergeant. We did not mess with Ma Brown. Whatever she said, it went. But she set that foundation, but she inculcated us with an understanding that excellence was in our family, in our DNA, so that nobody on the outside could tell you what you could not do. As I did when I was in elementary school, I wanted to be a doctor. I'm reading a book. I was a 4th or 5th grader that I had gotten from the library entitled, So You Want to Be a Doctor. And the teacher came by and said to me, you know what, kids like you don't do well in math and science. You ought to consider another profession. That crushed me, as opposed to having a spirited, encouraging type of heart and professor and teacher like you to encourage that student. And it took me a while to come out of that funk, realizing that I'm a child of God. I can do anything that I want. So my parents set that role and example. And 2, in terms of a mentor, you know what, if you can tell as a student, if you go to a teacher afterwards, if it's Professor Vincent, and also recognizing that you've got a cadre of friends that if you knew that they had an expertise that maybe you didn't, you would steer that student to. So having a relationship is really important. And I know the old expression that may be worn out, but it's true that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So with you showing interest in that student and referring them to somebody in a circle that you have is excellent, because it is always well constructed and very important to have an accountability partner, to have a teacher or a friend who can help take you to the next level. That there's a biblical expression that says, in the multitude of counsel, meaning godly counsel, there is safety. So having a good handful of trustworthy people is always helpful that you can bounce things off of. But at the end of the day, from a ministerial standpoint, God is the best judge, and he will speak to you in your heart to let you know where you are going to go and where you should go. And you rely on that, because there are many people on the outside who might have the same kind of very narrow mindset like my elementary school teacher, but you run from them and you run to somebody like Dr. Vincent.
Absolutely. Such great advice. Such great advice. Malik, who's one of our students, he wants to know, what were your inspirations in the broadcasting field?
Wow, Malik, I guess when I first got into it, I was looking, after being cut by the Atlanta Hawks, Malik, I was looking for a profession that was the closest thing to the high associated with playing sports. And in the professional world, that was in sales and sales management. The training was excellent. That provided a foundation for me to be able to do in the world of broadcasting what I did in the world of sports. But I also saw to it that I did not want to be pigeonholed to think that he could only do X number of things. I wanted to make it clear that I was just as gifted, driven, maybe not as naturally smart as others, but I had a drive and determination that no one would outwork me, so that I could be considered for things like being a special correspondent for CBS News, to work on programs like 60 Minutes and the Evening News, or the program you saw with Gayle King, CBS This Morning, being involved in voter specials. Look, all of us have interests, hobbies, and desires outside of whatever your principal pursuit is. Don't let anybody take that from you, because the degree to which you are well-rounded and can blend in other circles and learn from other people, that's going to make you that much more valuable down the road, because people won't pigeonhole you in a certain category.
I love that. Today we hear so many students who say, I just want to go into entertainment, or I just want to go into sports. Be able to do everything, not just one thing, because you shouldn't be pigeonholed. Let's see. We have a lot of questions coming in, and I know you're a very busy man.
No, doctor, I'm yours. So you keep me as long as you need me. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's see. Dr. Ward from Jim Vance, their media program, wants to know, how can students express their voice when using media as a communication tool?
Wow. Now, I hope I'm understanding correctly. Now, in my business, what I would do if I were interviewing the person who asked that question, I would drill down to understand, can you give me an example so that I can make sure that I am answering the question? But so, Dr. Ward, what I would say in terms of the communications industry general, it is an awesome platform. And thank God in this environment, Dr. Ward, you're not limited to one category of media platforms. Today, with everything that's available, from cable access television, which I understand is still linear, to all the apps where you can do your own podcasting, to where, you can go out to the world literally with the platforms that are available now. The only caution that I would give students is make certain that you're well thought out, well informed, because what you say on the media platforms today, yeah, I know Twitter and Instagram and all of that is maybe old school, and they've got so many other platforms out there, but whatever you say, whatever opinion you articulate, it will live on in perpetuity forever. I have been blessed to host the NFL's broadcast boot camp. It's an effort on the part of the NFL to prepare players for a career after football. And I get some of the best, most driven, most talented, smartest athletes who are in this program. They have to submit a composition as to why they want to do this. And these young men, and indeed, I'm sure the young women now over on the WNBA side, they're driven. And you see how many women are knocking it alive now in the world of broadcast. Just make sure you're informed, because today, unlike what it was yesterday, there is the nexus between sports, politics, religion, dealing with social justice issues. All I suggest is that you are as well informed as possible, because what you say will last in perpetuity. That's what I tell the athletes. And if you don't have a well-informed opinion, you know what? There's nothing wrong. If somebody sticks a microphone in your face and asks you a question about which you're not sure, there is nothing wrong with saying, I'm not sure, I don't know, I need to be better informed on this before I speak my mind. You will be thought to be a brilliant person. As the biblical expression goes, better to be quiet and be thought, to be smart, as opposed to open your mouth and reveal that you are a fool. So don't do that. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you said it. I talk about it with my students all the time about that digital footprint. It doesn't go away. So you're hearing, from someone else other than your professor. Oh, watch out what you're putting out
And
there.
I'm so glad that Dr. Vincent could help me with the nomenclature, the digital footprint. Now I'll be smarter the next time I talk about it. Yes, ma'am. That's good.
Okay, let's see. Next question. Malik wants to know, what do you think is the most impactful thing that you've done in your career?
Wow, Malik, boy, you've got some serious questions here. The most impactful, it probably runs the gamut, Malik, and it would include things like the clip that Dr. Vincent showed, where I would get a chance to not necessarily articulate my opinion, but to hear from somebody, a white person, using the N word and hearing what they're saying. In this place and space and time in our society where there's so much divisiveness in the public square, harsh language, brutal language, not loving language at all, it's so important that we are well educated and get to speak our minds, because I've articulated on the heels of the 8 minutes and 46-second campaign that we've done at CBS Sports, on the heels of the George Floyd murder that took place in Minneapolis. This is a hard time, but maybe one of the best times for us to speak our voice clearly in a homogenous group, Black and white and Asian and Hispanic, so we can have these conversations, because it's only the result of hard conversations, yes, painful conversations, that we should be able to articulate what the answer is going to be. Being able to hear what people might say that will be offensive, but it can't be any more offensive than what our history has been already. So we can talk about where we go forward. In the business world, people say, with respect to getting market share, increasing revenue, here's the paradigm. They say you cannot expect what you don't inspect. You need to be able to examine the metrics to see, are you heading in the right direction? That's the same prescription for success in terms of this issue, the third rail of conversation in America, race, that we need to have with that as well too, so that people are actively engaged in doing that. So I've done a number of things, whether it's the interview with the young white guy who used the N word, whether it was to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with a group of Special Olympians who wanted to show those who are challenged, if you will, have the same success drive as able-bodied athletes. Those are the kind I love to get behind the scenes. There was an Italian family that went over to Chernobyl in Russia to adopt some kids who were victims of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, kids who were deformed and had leg amputations as a result of being in that environment when the nuclear explosion happened. And they went with their church. They brought these kids back and they nursed them to wholeness to see what they could do here. Those kinds of stories. Or Black and white sitting down in Macon, Georgia. The church originally was one church, but now when the slave population grew so much, the church split and let the slaves have their own church right around the corner. Same name, two churches, one name. And then they get all these years later to have cross-cultural kinds of opportunities to see the issues we're dealing with are all the same. So I love doing all of those stories. Yeah, I can talk about Super Bowls. I can talk about NCAA championships, hosting some Olympic events and all of that. All that's nice and superficial. I try to get inside to see, are there some lessons from that we can learn to apply in the game of life so that you and I can live successful lives and impact others.
Wow. You've done so many amazing stories, so many great things. That's awesome to hear.
Mm.
Let's see. Garrison has our next question. Garrison wants to know, what are your views on the progression of women within sports and the obstacles they still face today with inequality in pay?
Hey, Garrison, first of all, and I know it would probably be deemed to say, oh, yeah, well, you know what? It's the right thing to say that you're glad to see a lot more women. Please, women have been the backbone of everything that I can think of, period. And I talked about the love I have for my mother. We called her the Sergeant, Mother Brown. And, you know, I would tell people at my mother's homegoing service, I told them I was a mama's boy. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but I saw my mother struggle, sacrificing things for herself to raise the 5 of us kids. Mothers are the backbones, even in the world of sports. Here's a crazy example. You know what? You can get out there and be physical as all day long on the football field, but let somebody talk about your mama and you go off. So the point is, women have always been the backbone of our country. I'm glad to see that we've got so many women that are now throughout the world of sports and news and other areas as well. Again, a result of this unfortunate time and space that we're in the country right now. People are starting to listen more, not only with their ears, but more importantly with their hearts to see that. And now, you know, as opposed to the kind of microaggression that we see often when people say, oh, wow, these women or these men of color, they're really articulate. You know, that's hurtful to hear that. Why would you assume that we aren't, especially when you're blessed to be under the tutelage of the likes of Dr. Vincent and so many others that historically we've gone through that are prevalent at our HBCUs among other colleges as well. So it's good to see. But here's my answer about the equal pay, Garrison. There is absolutely no logical reason why there is inequity in pay. It doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense. There's no rational answer for it. You can't give me a rational answer for it. That is an issue that should have been resolved a long time ago. And I'm hopeful that to the degree that awesome men and women of color now become more prevalent in the halls of corporate America and decision influencing and decision making positions, that will be corrected, having a seat at the table, because there's no way that makes any sense at all. I hope I've been pretty emphatic about that because it's real.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that. Let's see. We do have 2 more questions. This is from Keith. He says, good afternoon. I am Keith Archer, a 12th grade student at Archbishop Carroll, a part of the Jim Vance program.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, being at the profession you are at today, what would you say was your biggest step that took you to get where you are?
Wow. Keith, great question. Hey, Keith, first of all, and I know that program well. I was blessed. Keith, Jim Vance, God bless him, talked with me when I was hungry and trying to get into the business. I was doing work as, again, the analyst for the Washington Bullets, then they were named professional basketball team. Jim Vance took time with his daughter, to Dr. Vincent's point about she was carried to work by her mom as well, too. Jim Vance had his daughter with him at the lunch table when we sat to have a 30-minute discussion about what my dreams and hopes were. He took the time to talk with me about it. That was probably the biggest step. Steps like that where others were willing to pour into me because I asked the questions just like you guys are asking, and I internalized those answers so as to follow that track. And getting the opportunity with the Washington Bullets, and Abe Poland, who owned the team then, to be an analyst. Bob Johnson, who he and his wife Sheila Johnson were all owners, founders of Black Entertainment Television, giving me that opportunity to work with the likes of a Charlie Neal, who helped to train me. I made my mistakes, stumbled along the way. That's all a part of the preparation process. I was disappointed, as I shared with you before, about being offered a job and didn't get it. Had to deal with microaggressions and macro blatant aggressions. I remember going out at one of the Olympic venues when I was hosting a midday program, and I happened to be at lunch with a white producer who had had a little too much to drink. And he had commented about how one of the light-skinned European-looking blacks on our team probably should have been the host of the program because he didn't look white. And he caught himself when he said it, but that was just reflective of the mindset. So those are the things you still have to work your way through, having confidence in yourself, knowing that God has a plan for you, that if you believe it, stand on it and pursue it, listening to him and not others, no matter what they may throw your way. I don't care how egregious or how often, you will not be denied. And where many situations come up where people reject you or us, just understand that is a part of the deal. And rejection is nothing but the soil in which, if you take it personally, all of those seeds planted in the soil of rejection can only create a harvest of failure. And you, nor I, or anybody else is a failure. Many people have heard the expression, failure is an event. It is not a person. So you persevere to overcome and learn everything that you can each and every step along the way, because you will be tried and tested on it in some shape, form, or fashion, and you will already be prepared to go right through it and overcome and continue to what you're looking to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. Such a great answer. I tell students all the time, in our business, you write, you fail. The only way to get better is by writing more, doing more, and trying it over and over and over again. So hopefully the students are out there listening to that. We have one last question, and the question is from Ben. Ben wants to know, do you think HBCUs are important to keep around?
Ben, absolutely. And prior to this, since Dr. Vincent did say the final question, I hope that I'll get a chance to do this again. I hope you guys will invite me back if I've done a half decent job. HBCUs have been the backbone when we as a people could not go to school, the major white schools. Be clear that the reason I got a chance to go to Harvard was because of the riots in 1968. When the race riots in the cities around the country at the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And many schools then decided, okay, you know what, let's go and broaden the admissions opportunity for others. And we had more Black freshmen at Harvard that year than they have ever had and since. And the overwhelming majority have gone on to do significant things. Our HBCUs, they knew that. We know it today. When we were only relegated to, if you will, being in our communities where everybody was together, we knew what brilliant people were. More importantly, people who cared, like a Dr. Vincent. So yes, we need those nurturing environments. Now, I don't have anything but anecdotal evidence to talk about, or experiences to talk about this. I don't have any empirical evidence that, has been substantiated by polls and the like. But most of the students that I know who have come from HBCUs, when they've gone on to, whether they were majority white colleges or integrated colleges or in the world of work, have gone on and done exceedingly well, because by and large, the thinking is you're in an environment that's more encouraging and nurturing. Yes, you will still have challenges, and you ought to, because life brings with it challenges as well. But how awesome to be accustomed to looking around you and seeing excellence in a color that many people don't. When people say, I don't see color, that's not true from my humble perspective. We all see color. The question is, what do you see and think when you see that color? And when I look and see that, I see excellence, I see talent, I see diamonds and gems waiting to be polished to go off and help society at large. So that's a passionate answer to say unquestionably yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. JB, thank you so much for joining us today. We can't wait to have you back again to continue this conversation. It's really been a pleasure just spending this time with you.
Hey, Dr. Vincent, can I say thank you so much? And somebody had asked a question before about my role. And even though they mentioned specifically sportscasting and how does it play in the larger arena, my opportunity through Kurt Simmons, my good friend with whom I worked at BET way back in the day and helped to shape me and develop me, is to be exposed to people like you, Dr. Vincent, and others, so that I can make sure on a broader platform that I get a chance to showcase folks like you and the students like you have as well. And I do hope that if I pass the test, that you'll have me back again. Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that we find a way to have you back sometime, some way. We'll absolutely have you back.
And the same thing with Brother Cody Cox as well, too. So thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. And so for all of you out there watching, thank you for joining HBCU.TV and Tennessee State University for our virtual masterclass series where we are unapologetically HBCU. We'll see you next time.